All right. So good morning. Good morning, Corinne. Good morning to anybody who's watching this class afterwards. This is Emotions Masterclass number 6, how to pull yourself out of loneliness and engage with your community in ways that feel good to you. My name is Adina Barlow, and I'm a life coach who teaches you how to have an amazing relationship with yourself so you can have a wonderful relationship with everybody else. So today we'll talk about the 9 steps to really engage with your community in a way that's supportive to you instead of forceful. Um, as a reminder of the sort of general mental model that a lot of you have heard me talk about before, we try and get out of the mental model of right and wrong, good and bad, and into the mental model of feelings, needs, and strategies. So there's no fault. Nobody is at fault. It's more a matter of um, being open to our feelings because our feelings are information. That's it. All of our feelings, I like to call them our information buddies. Even um, pain and anger and frustration or jealousy or things like that are just as useful as our feelings of joy and um, pleasure and connection because they have information that says, hey, you're getting a need met, or hey, you are not getting a need met. And so when we receive our own emotions that way, then we can really discover, oh, this is what my needs are. And from that place, where our nervous system is more regulated and we can create better solutions to meet those needs in cooperation with other people instead of in conflict. And so that's the general mental model that I bring to all the teachings, and including being able to engage with your community. So, um, so I'd love to ask you some questions, Corinne, about your experience in trying to engage with your community, especially after COVID, after the lockdowns and everything. I know a lot of people have um, disengaged or really stepped back. And sometimes, it really supported their um, mental and emotional well-being. And then it's kind of hard to like get back into it. So what has been your experience?
Uh, I feel like right before COVID was when I started getting into ecstatic dance, uh,
Mm-hmm.
interested in somatics, snuggle communities here in
Oh,
Portland,
yeah.
very for just getting more comfortable with platonic touch, feeling safe.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, and it felt like that it like just shat the bed kind of thing. It was
Yeah.
so I'm trying to re-engage, and I think throughout COVID, I developed some behavioral issues or traumas that I'm still trying to work through.
Yeah.
There was instances of living with people who were either have toxic relationships that was
Mm-hmm.
very difficult being with, and then also
Mm-hmm.
somebody who turned out to be a predator and abusing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still feeling I feel that currently I'm like people aren't safe. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm working through my own personal stuff. So I feel like my emotional intensity at times feels
Mm.
like it could be traumatizing to other people. So there's a
Gotcha.
lot of shame, there's a lot of people
Mm.
aren't safe, but
Mm.
I spent most of my life before COVID being like, I need to be an independent woman and survive on my own, and
Mm.
having the realization being like, no, we need community. We're pack
Yeah.
animals. So that's
Yes.
why I'm here. I'm like, okay,
Cool.
I know there's this fear of people that I need to work through.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's just different colored glasses kind of thing, especially, and it like makes sense based off of my
Mm-hmm.
past experiences. But
Mm-hmm.
currently, okay, working through those triggers and then also having like a groundwork. Because I
Mm-hmm.
realized I went from people pleasing, and then being really excited to overwhelm. So kind of the extreme of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
getting
Mm-hmm.
really hyper with people. And then also working through not feeling like a burden. Like we
Mm,
are impacting each other. That's kind of how it works. Yet
mhm.
I grew up with the mindset, and it's really difficult to move through of like, I'm too much for people. Um,
Ah, okay.
that's where I'm currently at. So it's been
Yeah.
a delightful mess.
Delightful mess. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that pre-pandemic, you really started to get more comfortable with community, especially platonic touch, like safe touch or safer. We'll say like um, one of my teachers, Shelby Lee, who teaches creating safer spaces, um, she suggests that it's really unrealistic for us to achieve a safe environment. However, we can achieve a safe enough environment to connect with other people and and live our lives in a grounded, like regulated way in our nervous system so that we're happier.
Mhm.
So it sounds like you were really starting to um, get into this place of feeling safe enough to be with people to like receive touch and be close and dance and play. And then during the pandemic, you lived with people who you did not feel safe enough with. And um, and then the old patterns of like people pleasing and stuff came up, and then you were like, okay, no way, I need to stand my ground. And then like swung to the other side was like, okay, this is, like more of the intensity came out for you. And then are kind of afraid, like, okay, am I too much for people? Is that kind of where you've been?
Yeah, I would say when I came back from COVID, it's kind of like you got hypersensitive to stuff. It's like, oh, I've
Yeah.
been not in crowds, or a lot of people have developed trauma in some way through this.
Yeah. A lot of
For
trauma.
instance, I was homeless for a little bit.
Oh.
I was
Uh-huh.
trying to find safe work.
Mm-hmm.
There, like my mental illness started creeping back up again.
Mm.
So it's like, and now, yeah, there's a lot of beliefs of just like, oh, I'm more fucked up, so I can't.
Oh.
It's not okay to interact or find healthy people, but I also recognize there's a lot of perfectionism. And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, like trying to find what safe is. It's like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
like safe enough, because otherwise the
Right.
perfectionist is coming in and it's just trying to find every way that things aren't safe. So,
Exactly. And I love that you recognize the perfectionism. Um, and the way I see perfectionism is it's actually one of the faces of shame.
mm,
And shame, like, destroys connection because it's essentially like, you are not good enough. You do not belong as you are.
yeah.
And how can we be a pack animal if we don't belong? And so that shame voice shows up in perfectionism, in I'm too much for people, I'm not good enough, um, I have to act a certain way, I have to please people to belong or to fit in. Um, all of that is kind of the voice of shame. And when we can name shame, we can tame it. So, sort of as a prerequisite foundation for engaging in safer ways with people and cultivating trust within ourselves to trust others, recognizing that voice of shame is a really big step.
Hmm.
And just naming it like, oh, that's shame. Okay, got it. That's not me. That's shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your truth and your authentic experience and your courage to be vulnerable. I appreciate that. Yeah. So let's tie in the 9 steps I've identified and want to share with you today for how to engage with people in a safer or safe enough way that um, that you feel like you belong or you can trust people. And the number one we actually talked about already, and that's to create a safe enough internal environment. And what that has to do with entirely is recognizing the voice of shame. It's whenever shame comes up, we'll tell ourselves stories of, I'm not good enough. I have to please somebody. I have to behave in a certain way in order to fit in or belong. And or I have to do things that don't actually feel good for me. So for example, um, let's say you're at a party and there's somebody who wants to talk to you and you feel quite an aversion to that person. Like, oh, for whatever reason, you don't know why, but you just feel the strong aversion to that person. And they want to talk to you. And you're like, well, I'm at this party and I have to talk to this person because I'm at a party and that's what you're supposed to do. And so you talk to that person and progressively get more and more uncomfortable because you're making yourself talk to them and you don't actually want to. And I laugh because I've done this before and it's like I laugh to kind of soothe the ridiculousness of it when I tell myself that I have to engage with people in ways that don't feel good. It's kind of ridiculous, but that is the voice of shame. Like, oh, I have to do this. Um, or another example would be you're having a conversation with somebody and they're talking about something that you have zero interest in. And you're just letting them go on and on and on, and you're totally disengaged. And internally in your mind, you're like, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? And you're like, but I have to be polite, so I can't interrupt. And all the while, you're sitting there like, why did I come to this party? This sucks. So when you create a safe enough environment internally, you're you're reminding yourself or like practicing this self-worth where you have the right to end a conversation you don't want to have. You have the right to not engage with somebody who you have an aversion to. You have the right to engage with somebody, and then if you feel like, okay, I'm done with this person right now, you can walk away. So that internal safety and awareness cultivates self-trust, and self-trust is foundational to be able to trust other people, because then you'll know, like, you will remove yourself from situations that don't feel good to you. And that is without that, we cannot feel safe enough to engage with people.
Mhm.
And then we have to employ, well, then anger comes in, and anger and isolation as a backup to create a safer environment for you, where then you can just, you blow off the handle, and that's one way to get people to leave you alone, right? However, that strategy does not meet the need for connection with other people or self-trust, but it does meet your need for for safety. So it's, again, it's sort of paying attention to, okay, what are my emotions? What are they directing me toward? Oh, right now I'm not feeling safe enough. Okay, what can I do instead that will allow me to feel safe enough and maintain connection? So, number one, create a safe enough internal environment to engage with people and disengage with people when you want to. Number two is to replace the model of right and wrong, good and bad, with the model of, that feelings, needs, and strategies, and creative experimentation. And so that's what I'll expand on more right now, is creative experimentation. Oftentimes, we don't know what strategies will work or not. There is no way to know for sure until we try it. But here's the where like shame comes in an insidious way. It's like you have to be perfect. You have to get it right or don't do it at all. So it totally wipes out any possibility of creative experimentation. And so it's impossible to find strategies that actually work because you're paralyzed in fear of getting it wrong. And so when you give yourself permission to experiment, to play with different strategies. So maybe you go to a party and you're like, okay, I'm going to play with um, walking up to somebody that I feel attracted to and asking to have a conversation. Or I'm going to play with like just sitting back and seeing who comes to me. If you're somebody who normally like goes out, you might sit back for a minute. Um, you might play with starting a conversation about something that is totally interesting to you that you have no idea somebody else might be interested in. It's whatever you choose to do, it's really about that creative experimentation. What works? What feels good? What doesn't feel good? And then you bring in the foundation of that internal, safe enough environment so that when you find strategies that don't work, you still have your own back. You're not judging yourself or saying, like, oh, I knew I wasn't good enough, or like, oh, I knew I couldn't be with people. Instead, you're like, oh, I found a strategy that didn't work. Interesting. What else is possible? So that brings us to number 3. Learn about your needs and your preferences. In our culture, many of us have been taught that to pay attention to our own needs is selfish. To put our needs before others' needs is selfish and bad and wrong, and it's shaped. However, if you don't pay attention to your needs, what's going to happen is you will get stuck in power struggles and control dramas in whatever relationship you're in, be that a coworker or a family member or an intimate partner or a friend. If you're not aware of your own needs, what's going to happen is when they're not met, you will feel that that loss of energy because your needs are not met, and you will need to get that energy from somewhere. And most of us turn to getting that energy from other people, and that's what a power struggle is. So that's when we like um, engage in different roles like the victim, the rescuer, and the villain, or assign another person one of those roles. But the way out of that, those control dramas, is to recognize our own needs and then decide how we want to get them met and negotiate with the other person. So learning about your needs and your preferences helps you create more safety around other people and helps them feel safer, because they are then going to be aware of what's going on for you, and they'll know what to expect, and they'll know, well, you'll be more predictable because you're actually communicating what your needs are. So one example in the opposite is like, let's say one of my control dramas, my default one is the rescuer. And so what I'll do when I'm like unconscious of my needs in an engagement, especially with somebody very close to me, is I will I will often try to rescue them if they're in some kind of pain, mentally, emotionally, or physically. I might go in and try to fix that or fix them. and and how that looks is I will overgive. I will um, do anything they need me to do, no matter the cost personally, until I can't anymore. And then I'll blow up. And suddenly I become the victim in my mind, and they become the villain. But then they'll feel bad because I blew up at them seemingly out of nowhere. You know, it was they totally it was unpredictable for them. And so then they feel terrible. And then I make myself the villain, like, oh shit, I did that thing again. Bad me. You know? So there's that like one person I follow, Teal Swan, she calls it the triangle from hell. It's this victim rescuer villain triangle. And and so without being conscious of my needs, I will go into this drama with people. If instead I'm willing to step back and say, okay, that person is resilient. They haven't asked me to fix them or rescue them. They've got this. It's cool. And then I can pay attention to my own needs and feelings. So like, oh, I feel like engaging with this person. Cool. Oh, they want me to do this. That doesn't feel good to me. I'm not going to do that. Then, and I can communicate that with them. Then I become more predictable to them. And so they feel safer. And I have my own back. So I have more internal safety as well, or internal self trust. So learning about your own needs and preferences, being willing to admit them to yourself and admit and communicate them to that person, again, is essential to being able to engage with people in a way that feels good. Okay. Any questions on those first three? Okay. All right. Number 4, be interested in something. So if you have no interests, if nothing is really interesting to you, and you sort of just like go along with what everybody else is doing, you are less interesting to other people. This was something that that I learned a while back, I think from a man named Aziz Gazapura, who is a confidence coach in Portland, Oregon. When you are interested in something, let's say, what is something you love, like you love to talk about or research or engage with, Corinne?
Uh, Sustainable architecture.
Sustainable architecture, totally. Okay, and is that something that like if you engage in conversation with somebody about, you could just go on as long as they're engaged?
So much so I've gotten the I didn't ask for a lecture comment.
Okay,
I'll zone out, yeah. But I
yeah.
love it.
Okay, so as you are interested in sustainable architecture, when you bring that to the table, you light up, right? Yeah. And when you light up in a social situation, quite often others light up. Now, of course, you've got to be mindful of engagement. Like if it's just you talking at another person, that's different than talking with another person. So it's like a fire hose of information is without consideration for their experience or thoughts um, or interest as well. That's what creates the like okay, I didn't want to lecture today, right? However, if you're not interested in anything, then what fun is it to talk to you? Like, there's nothing that lights you up. And so people will have a harder time talking with you, and therefore you will have a harder time talking to others. So, being interested in something or several things, then you can light up in conversation and have that back and forth, that engagement with your communicating partner. So, have you experienced that where, let's say, with the sustainable architecture, you had another person who's also interested in it and totally lit up, and you two were just like talking for hours about it?
Totally.
Yeah. And how did that feel? How did that interaction feel?
Uh, Fun. Like it,
Fun.
yeah, it gives me energy. Uh,
Energizing. Yeah.
yeah, and imaginative and creative. Like it
Ooh,
becomes
yeah.
like a childlike sense of play where you forget time.
Yes, exactly. So the more of those you have when engaging with other people, the more fun it is to just be with other people, to talk with other people, and the more fun they have. Again, that difference between like talking with the other person versus talking at the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So number five, and this ties into talking with the other person, is be curious and ask clarifying questions. So let's say, oh, well, like I just did with you, where I asked, like, have you engaged with somebody in this way of, or in this kind of conversation about sustainable architecture? So that curiosity and asking you questions, how did that feel for you?
Um, I guess neutral. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. I think
So,
in a
mhm.
conversation setting, it would be invigorating or something like that.
Mm,
Whereas
mhm.
here, I feel like I have the mindset to learn, so I'm open
Ah,
to it.
okay. Mhm.
But yeah, I guess if I think about it, it does feel more interesting when I'm
Mm,
being asked, and then personal too, when
mm.
it's my own personal experience as a part of a workshop. Yeah,
Yeah. So more interesting, more personal. You feel more engaged.
yeah. I just think about
Mhm.
that one for a second.
Yeah. Cool. And especially in a conversation, like a social conversation, it sounds like that's more front of mind for you, as different
Yeah.
than like a workshop or a training or something.
Hmm.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah. So curiosity, one of the things I often say is curiosity replaces judgment. And this is also like a huge growth edge for me, where especially if I'm in conflict with somebody, oftentimes my brain will automatically go to judgment about them or myself. And if instead I can be curious about their experience or my own experience and ask clarifying questions, it helps me, again, shift out of the mental model of right and wrong, good and bad, and into the model of feelings, needs, strategies, and come up with creative solutions with that person. So it can be used in both ways. The curiosity that's like, oh, you're interested in that? Okay. What about like this and that and the other? So you're digging in a little deeper, you're lighting up, they're lighting up. And then on the other side, where if there is some kind of conflict, then you can dig a little deeper into, oh, what did you mean when you said XYZ? Or, oh, what is your experience with X, Y, and Z that you brought up? And using that for your own internal safer environment, then you can think, okay, what was my intention when I said this? Or what was my need when I did that? And so that curiosity and then asking those clarifying questions, it like keeps the door open for connection instead of slamming it shut with judgment. And then, putting stories on them like, oh, they're, labeling them or dehumanizing them or doing that to yourself. Like, oh, I'm just not good with people, or um, I'm whatever, like the judgment really shuts down connection where curiosity opens the door to connection. Yeah. Have you experienced that in any of your interactions?
Uh, yes, I think I'm often somebody who will say, "Hey, I'm having an assumption." I've done a lot
Ah,
of like NVC and authentic relating practices,
mhm.
so I needed that to have like the framework just to figure out like, okay, how do I ask questions? Because I think a lot of us are not really taught some of those basics. But
Totally.
what I think is really fun is seeing somebody else like light up about a passion or they end up sharing a vulnerability. And then I
Mm,
like to call it, you get to see the whole rainbow of somebody. Not just like,
yeah,
how's your day? How's the weather? It's like, oh, you're a human. You have pain. You have
yeah.
suffering. You have life. You have loss. It's like, oh, it's
Mm,
really cool. And then I feel that like connection on that deeper level that I think all
mm.
humans crave. At least I know I do.
Yes.
Yeah, like
Yeah. Yeah. So that rainbow of the person and that connection. What was that last thing you said?
oh, I was gonna say it's harder the other way. Like if somebody asks me questions, I'm just like
Oh,
judgment gets really hard. I'm like, I'm too broken right now.
okay.
Let me not share my authenticity because it might scare somebody. Um,
Yeah.
which usually I realize is a lot bigger because of that internalized judgment,
Yes.
which, like you said, shuts down exploration or
Yes.
possibility of somebody coming in. So I like the uh, curiosity replaces judgment type of thing.
Mm,
Type of
yeah.
thing.
So and thank you for sharing. Yeah. I'd be very curious if you were to um, employ curiosity, let's say with a journal practice.
Mhm.
One of the things I do is Marshall Rosenberg's emergency self-empathy, where it's like, okay, what am I feeling? What are my needs? What do I want to do about it? Um, so when the self-judgment comes up, and then the other tool I'll use is Byron Katie's The Work. Have you heard of
Mm,
that?
I have. I just got her book.
Awesome. Yeah, her one belief at a time worksheet is amazing to get curious and inquire about the beliefs I have on myself or others. Usually they're on myself and I
Yeah.
project them on others. But I'm curious how much space might open for you if you were to do a little bit of practice around some of those judgments you have with yourself
Mm.
that you've identified have kept you from answering questions when other people are curious about you.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, cool. And this is where, again, it's like the whole premise of my coaching work is that for you to have wonderful relationships with other people, it has to start at home. And home means your heart, your mind, your body, your spirit. And so other people reflect our experience with ourselves. And so it can be this beautiful dance where it's like, okay, there's this issue I'm having with another person. Where is that within myself? Or gosh, I'm having so much fun with this other person. Where is that within myself? And it also creates a sense of power because I can shift and change things within myself, but I can't change other people. And so to the extent that I take back instead of saying, "Oh, they're making me feel this way," I take that back and say, I'm feeling this way. I'm curious why. Then I can work with that and bring it back to my relationships. And how that might look in my relationships is there might be some people that I say no to. Like, no, I don't want a relationship with you anymore because of your behaviors that don't work for me. That's fine. But I stop giving them my power. I stop saying, you are the cause of my pain, and decide, like, oh, I get to change this. I get to honor myself. I get to have compassion for myself and you and be out of this relationship if that's what it takes. Often it doesn't come down to that. Sometimes it needs to. That's okay. Yeah. So being curious with yourself, with others, asking clarifying questions can really um, help you decide what to do in that interaction or that with that person. Okay, so number 6 is be consistent in taking action, especially if you have lost the practice of engaging with other people, be that in one-on-one interactions or in group situations. You've got to cultivate more of a consistency with getting out and engaging with people. And that might look like one person once a week. If you haven't been engaging with people for months or like since pre-pandemic, or maybe you feel a lot of anxiety with engaging with people, like take it really slow. If it's an all or nothing, you're not going to get anywhere, and you will actually create more trauma for your nervous system. So taking it slow and going, okay, this is where I'm at. What consistent action can I take that gets me just a little closer to engaging with people? So if you're somebody who, you typically see people often, it might be um, that you're getting out more often, or just when you go out, you're more conscientious about how you engage with other people. But for some, it's a huge challenge to get out at all. So be compassionate with yourself about that and recognize that even a little bit, if you don't see anybody for a whole month, maybe for you it's like you engage with somebody every other week for a little while, and then when that gets more comfortable, then you can pick it up to like once a week for a while, and when that gets more comfortable, then you can do like a couple times a week. But the consistent action, that's critical, because without action, you're just stuck in your head. And you can think about these strategies all day long, and you can do the internal work all day long. But if you're not taking external action as well and applying them, you don't create any different experience for your nervous system. And so it sort of maintains the stories you have had previously. So the consistent action offers your body and your mind and emotions a different experience that you can train. It's like going to the gym. If you're sitting at home thinking about going to the gym, you're not getting stronger. You've got to go to the gym and pick up the heavy weights. And hopefully, um, in a way that's gentle, that's safe enough, and that like gets you to incremental strength instead of forcing yourself to do what you think you should do, hurting yourself, and then being like, oh, I knew that wasn't for me, and quitting and going home forever. So the consistent action is with compassion. And that's also where like having a coach can come into play. Um, I tried to go to the gym for like a decade and just really had no idea what I was doing. And so I'd go, I'd be like, yes, I'm gonna make it this time. I'd be gung-ho for like 2 weeks. I'd get a membership. I would try to do the exercises. I didn't really know what I was doing. And so sometimes I'd hurt myself, or I would I wouldn't see any progress. And after 2 to 4 weeks, I just quit for another year. Whereas when I actually hired a physical trainer and they taught me what exercises to do that was safer, and then helped me do them and stay encouraged and see my progress, it was much easier to stay consistent and develop those habits. Either way, doing it yourself or having a coach, that consistent action is key. Number 7, take alone time when you need it. If again, it's an all or nothing, like, oh, I have to engage with people if I want to be social again, and then you need a break, but you're unwilling to take that alone time, that erodes the self-confidence. It erodes your self-trust. So let's say you're pretty introverted, and um, and you go to a party and it's like a huge deal. It's a lot of emotional effort. You might feel a lot of social anxiety. You might need to take alone time for like a week to recover. Do it. Give yourself permission to do it. And then when you go back to another event, you'll have more energy and you'll have trust in yourself that you will take care of yourself on the other end of that big push outside of your comfort zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Have you had any experience with that?
Um, yeah. Uh, I guess my issue currently is it's hard to be alone with myself.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
To be with other people, so it's like a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas I think I've just had a lot of instances recently with like medical professionals or finding therapists where it's been rejection or
Mm-hmm.
miscommunication or some other stuff. Or like some friends, it was like, wow, this is a really toxic environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it's a combo of getting out of like trauma
Yeah.
states
Yeah.
because that's been a really big, not only re-triggering but reliving.
Yeah.
And then I realized, yeah, that puts up a wall.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, so I think for me in engagement with either myself or other people, it's like that criticism, that self-protector, that like
Mm-hmm.
angry avoidant. That's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, this is just gonna hurt. But I also,
Mm.
so
I so
yeah,
crave it. Yeah.
I used to have a really easy time being alone with myself,
Mm-hmm.
except with self-criticism and
Yeah.
perfectionism and not feeling like I can function in society.
Yeah. So it sounds like a
Giving me
lot about
this for,
self-judgment.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like just
Yeah.
knowing how to self-care, like I think a big piece is like, oh, I don't have self-trust at all.
Yeah.
Um, so hence, wow, okay, this is why I don't trust other people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's interesting.
Yeah. Great awareness. And again, thank you for sharing.
Mm.
Yeah. And this is why the steps are set up with the first one being like creating that safer internal or safe enough internal environment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause
Cool.
otherwise I would find it easy to take alone time, especially practicing that. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
having like the dialogue of like, I don't have capacity anymore. I
Yeah.
have to go. Or having agreements beforehand
Yeah.
with friends. It's like, I'm just gonna leave. I hit my
Mm-hmm.
wall and then I don't have the capacity to communicate and I get overwhelmed and stressed and then I don't want to hang out again. So
Mm-hmm.
just know that if I go, okay, I have a minute, I gotta go, it's not
Yeah.
personal. So sometimes
Yes.
the
Love it.
prefacing, especially if you have a lot of high sensitivities or
Mm-hmm.
easily big triggers that you're working through, having that
Mm-hmm.
preface with friends can be, it makes things feel so much safer. And then you're not
Absolutely.
having, yeah, like, oh, I have to walk on eggshells because I don't know what's going to happen with this person.
Yes. Yes. Creating that predictability.
Yeah,
Hmm. Yes, I love that you bring this up because that leads us to number 8, which is establishing your boundaries and following through on them. And part of establishing your boundaries is communicating those boundaries with your people. So, yeah, your boundary might be, okay, when I feel overwhelmed, I am going to leave. And that communication and follow through will be letting your friends know, like, hey, just so you know, I have, I might get overwhelmed at this party. And if I do, I'm going to leave. That doesn't mean that doesn't, it's nothing against you. It's just how I'm going to be taking care of myself today. And then you do it, the follow through piece
That I find the hardest yet.
that you find the hardest. Tell me more
Yeah.
about that.
Um, so I can like strategize in my head, and then when it actually comes time to do it, the shame piece,
Ah, the
it seems
shame.
more amplified,
Yeah.
whether it's nervousness of trying something new.
Yeah.
Um, I'm for me, I'm constantly combating that I can't do something. There's no point. What's the point? Like a lot of
Hmm.
hopelessness.
Hopelessness.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I'm just like it's not gonna work. It's not gonna get any better.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I'm like internally doing that, which brings up a lot of feelings and
Hmm.
body sensations.
Hmm.
So my heart will start to race. I'll start to talk
Yeah.
faster. So it's having, I think, for this type of stuff is the ability to practice on smaller things, whether it's like,
Ooh,
hey, a
yes.
friend, can I practice this with you?
Love
And
it.
can you respond in the worst way possible or whatever, so that I know
Hmm.
how that feels? Because that
Yes.
part, it's like, oh, my body is, I can think rationally, but my body is like a toddler. So
Yes,
sometimes it
absolutely.
wants to freak out. So that I find the hardest part about follow
Follow
through.
through. Hmm.
And then when we are depleted of our basic needs, it's even harder to
Hmm.
remember our goals and stay committed. So
Yes.
that's a big piece that I'm working on right now. Yes.
Yeah. I love how you put it. It's um very eloquently put, like that it's your nervous system, it's your body, and especially when you feel more depleted, that you have less energy to combat um the stories that sort of keep you stuck in what you're doing instead of following through. Hmm.
Yeah.
And that practice with trusted people on smaller things can help you develop the strength, the internal strength and practice so that you can then follow through on your boundaries when it comes to bigger situations. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you mentioned asking your friend to like help you be in a situation that's going to be more difficult. That's great. And there's another one where it's like you can ask your friend to offer you reassurance or encouragement when you follow through. So, for
Cool.
instance, yeah, um, for instance, I recently discovered that although I have over the years learned to have great boundaries with most people, the one person I haven't been able to say no to or have really good boundaries with is my mom.
Mm.
and 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 then it would turn into that, control drama and the power struggles and all that stuff, which like she hates that and I hate that, and like that doesn't make for a great relationship. So when I actually recognize, like, oh, the issue is I haven't been able to establish my boundaries with her and follow through on them, then I was able to have this conversation with her where I was like, hey, this is what's up for me. Would you be willing to help me by by saying something like, thank you for your honesty when I tell you no? Or um, thank you for being honest. Thank you for following through, like encouraging me to have boundaries with you. And she thought about it and she's like, yes, I'd like to help you with that. But would you, instead of just saying no, would you please say, um, I don't feel comfortable with that?
Mm.
And so she was able to then negotiate her needs where the word no feels like a huge rejection to her. But um, if I say, I don't feel comfortable with that, for her, she understands it's not about her, it's about me. And then she can encourage me. So that's where it was like we were able to find this solution to meet both of our needs and to practice this establishing our boundaries and following through. And, you know, and then I want to do that for her as well. I think there was one of the things that she needed, that we found a solution like this. But yeah, it's it develops trust internally and externally to practice. And we get stronger with anything, you know, be that physical muscle or mental emotional muscle. The more we practice in a safer or safe enough way, the easier it becomes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So last thing is make repairs when you need to. A repair is when you have made a mistake, you acknowledge that mistake, and find out what you can do to make it better. And this combats shame more than anything in a relationship. Well, no, more than anything, your internal safe enough environment does, but this is like number two. To recognize that you don't have to be perfect in your relationships. You can make mistakes. That is okay because you are a human. You are going to make mistakes. There's no way around it. And that ties into the creative experimentation. Sometimes what you try will not work. In fact, often it will not work. It will not produce the results you want. That is okay. And when it's okay, you have more space to try something new. So when you engage with another person in a way that creates pain for them or like triggers pain for them, you can repair that. And it needs to be in a way that feels authentic for you. If you're being like, oh, I'm sorry, just to appease them, that's not a repair. That's pleasing them. And that's like the focus is actually on you in that situation because you feel uncomfortable with their pain and you feel uncomfortable with the shame that you are feeling. And so you're like, I'm sorry, please forgive me. It doesn't actually address their experience. Whereas when you can acknowledge, like, oh, when I said that, it was really hurtful for you, wasn't it? And then you can hear their experience and receive their experience. And from that place, after you have received their experience, then you can say, I'm sorry. What can I do to make this better? That kind of repair actually creates a stronger connection than before you made a mistake in the first place. So, being willing to engage and possibly make a mistake, knowing that you will repair afterward if needs be, that actually creates stronger relationships and more trust for yourself. Have you experienced any of that, Corinne? Like
Oh
where
yeah.
other people did for you or you did for them?
Um, I've definitely experienced it both ways. I think like
Mhm.
that's something I value and I try to put into connection is acknowledging um how the other person feels or how they were impacted. Because
Mhm.
like that is like when somebody just says sorry,
Mhm.
it feels sort of empty.
Empty.
Or like you
Yeah.
said, people pleasing. So I've
Yep.
had that where somebody's been like, I'm sorry, just let's just
Mm.
stop.
Yeah.
And it's like being uncomfortable with being
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yep.
Um, but there is something I like that. It's like we're all gonna make mistakes. What helps build us stronger is like repair work
Mhm.
and how we move through it and knowing that that other person's actually gonna recognize and see that impact on me. And
Mhm.
same with them. And then I feel like, yeah, it gets specific too. It's
Mhm.
not just like, oh, I'm sorry, because then it's like, is it going to happen again? This
Right.
particular
Exactly.
incident, what was the incident? And then like, yeah, getting creative. So I like the specific of that.
Mhm.
That feels really like tangible and something that has a growth afterwards versus just
Yes.
like, I'm sorry, please stop freaking out right now, or
Right.
crying, or
Yeah.
being mad at me. Yeah,
Yeah.
that can be
Hmm.
hard. Sure.
Yeah, for sure. It can be hard, especially when that shame piece comes up. Like, oh, I'm a bad person, like putting myself in the villain role. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently had this where I had forgotten to send the notes. So usually after a client session, I always send the notes the same day. And I'd forgotten to with two of my clients because I was focused on helping my mom through her cancer treatment. And I lost their notes entirely. So they had no access to it, and I didn't either. And I felt so bad. And at first, like automatically the judgment, the shame came up. I'm like, oh, I'm a terrible coach, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, in the email to them, I was like, hey, I apologize. I didn't send these notes right away. And actually I lost them. Um, what I will do to make sure this doesn't happen in the future is I will send them to you immediately after the session instead of the typical 24 hours that I usually give myself. And they were like, cool, thank you. So it was okay that I made this mistake.
Mhm.
I am a human too. And to have that specific, like you said, to address that specificity so that they know I won't do it again. And then it takes that follow through on my part for them to develop trust with me to know, like, okay, she is going to do that different behavior, she said. And for me to trust that, like, okay, I am going to do that different behavior, I am following through, that creates more trust between us than we had before I lost their notes. Yeah, cool. So that's it. That's the 9.
Cool.
So, what are some of your biggest takeaways today that you think you can apply now to yourself as you engage and start engaging more with people?
Ooh, what I really like was just learning about my needs and preferences, like actually
Mm,
being able to dive in, because I think that's a really big piece that I'm missing in some places, not only for
mm,
self-care
mhm,
and then gauge, like I feel like that's a good route where other things come off of that, like how much time do I give myself? How much
mhm,
space? Do I need to be alone? Am I
mhm,
seeking connection? And I've recognized I'm like, oh, sometimes I wait too long for stuff and it comes
mhm,
out in a desperation. Like my needs want to get
mhm.
met, gonna
Yeah.
keep on talking
Yes.
louder and louder.
Hmm.
So that and figuring out like the follow through with like compassion,
Mm,
the compassionate exploration piece or creative exploration,
hmm.
like that, it feels more playful. It brings less
Mm,
of this. I'm starting to recognize like growing up on the East Coast, everything's so harsh in my head,
yeah.
and trying to add more of that compassion because when I'm burnt out, it's like, please
Mm,
stop hitting me. I'm talking to my own thoughts.
hmm.
So it's just like, ooh, that definitely walls out and
Hmm.
stops vulnerable connection with people. And also
Hmm.
knowing how to repair. Like, I think that's a really good step of addressing issues because
How to
sometimes it's like,
repair.
well, yeah, the
Hmm.
relationship's over. What's the point?
Mm,
Blah. Or I'm so like ashamed. This person probably
hmm.
doesn't want to see me or hear from me again.
Hmm.
Where that's all assumptions. I can
Right.
address those assumptions and take that step. I like how that's a big one with combating shame, like these
Hmm.
action pieces with
Hmm.
combating shame. So yeah, there's
Cool.
a lot of stuff in here. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, you're welcome. And for those who are watching, thank you for taking the time to learn about your relationships so you can have better, more enjoyable relationships with other people. It really does have a ripple effect. Like your work with yourself, when it affects you and it just naturally touches the people around you, which creates a better environment for all of us. So thank you. Thanks for the work you're doing because it's not easy and it can be scary um and facing the stuff inside ourselves that keep us isolated and stuck and in shame, like that is hard. It's no walk in the park. So I really appreciate that you're doing it. Keep it up. And if you want my support, you can go to dinahbarlow.com, find podcasts. I'm going to take a little break from doing the emotions masterclass, give myself about a month, probably a month or two, as I have my baby upcoming and learn how to be a parent. That's going to be like this huge growth experience, and I'm not sure how it will turn out. So give myself a month or so to just fully engage with that and let everybody know when the next emotions masterclass will be. Thank you so much, Corinne, for sharing again vulnerably and honestly with us, courageously today. And thanks for being here. Until
Thanks
next
for
time, you're welcome.
having
Okay,
me. Okay.
thanks. Bye.